When I realize when we go into nutrition, it brings up emotions, and like a really hard workout is probably the last thing they need right now. But when you blend like fitness with energy work, their bodies are always telling you something. By day 3 or 4, she already started losing weight.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Today, my guest is Brian DeCastro, who is a lifestyle optimization coach and Reiki master. Hi, Brian. Thanks so much for being here.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm pretty
Oh, my
excited to get
pleasure.
into the convo.
My pleasure. Awesome. So, I was just reading a little bit over your biography here, and it says that you help busy entrepreneurs and professionals who want to level up in health, success, and self life fulfillment, right? So, you kind of help people get unstuck and engage more in the spiritual journey, right? Can you tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about that?
Yeah, I think a lot of trainers and coaches usually have a backstory and everything. So like often our backstory is usually all the things that are leading us to the tools we need to help others, if that is actually our intention, right? So, but what I found is the time that where I always ended up coming up with a opportunity to up level is been usually I've been in an extended phase of frustration and not ending up with the results I'm looking for, and just not feeling, excited, inspired, passionate. I usually look at that as an opportunity. Well, that's not how I looked at it before, but I now look at it as an opportunity. And usually, when people show up in my space looking for help, it's usually coming from that kind of place. They're not usually calling me up when things are going amazing, or even if things are going well, they're just looking for. They're curious. They're curious about what more can can be part of their journey. So, and that's when I kind of do my best work, is when people need that help to get unstuck.
That's awesome. I totally agree. So for me too, I find that the biggest changes that I've ever made were when something came either to a hard stop, which is not always comfortable. It's really uncomfortable.
Hmm.
I'd rather do it before then, or when things get really stagnant and I'm just bored. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome. So how did you end up becoming, a personal trainer and Reiki master? Can you just tell me that like in a
Yeah,
nutshell?
I was always brought up around fitness and health and that sort of thing, just around my parents and stuff. And I started lifting weights when I was 14, just going into high school. And that's how I got my passion for strength training, which led to a passion in powerlifting, which was influenced by my uncles who competed at the world level in powerlifting. So that, powerlifting is one of the things that sort of put me on the map after school in the industry, as because we intend as trainers tend to have some sort of niche, right? When I started working with regular folks, though, it's like, the typical person doesn't need to actually squat or deadlift 400, 500 pounds. So it's like, how do I use my strength training and conditioning training and knowledge to help regular folks? And so it started with the training side, then it got into weight management that involves nutrition and lifestyle design work and stuff. When I realized when we go into nutrition, it brings up emotions, and there's emotional things connected to nutrition, like, wow, curious. So I started doing more training and holistic lifestyle coaching through the Czech Institute. And in 2005, when I got hurt training for a powerlifting competition and pretty much sort of ended my competitive part of my career, I had to channel that energy somewhere. And this was my first sort of like hero's journey of the stuck place where I had to, heal myself from the injury and rebuild, and then for 2 years wander as a trainer, as a fitness professional, trying to figure out what would light my fire again. And that sent me on more of a spiritual journey, which is brings me now to what I do with people. Well, I'm still working with their health, their fitness, um, weight management, the things we typically be looking at in our health, but it's like optimizing our health so that fill in the blank, right? What is it that we really want to get into, right? And I feel like, at certain times of our life and certain like phases in life too, we kind of like stop and go, there's got to be more to this than just grinding at work, coming home, doing the routine. and I really love getting into that place with people as far as like what would just light your fire again, what would light the passion, what would inspire you to do the things that would require the changes to experience yourself in a completely different way, right? And have those conversations, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. And so many people don't have the fire lit, or they're focusing on the wrong things. And then when it's their time, they will come around to like asking the right questions and reaching out for, somebody like you, right?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
just curious, were any of your parents spiritual? Like, how did you get into the whole Reiki thing? Well, you said you went to
I would say, yeah, like
you, so that's all check.
yeah, yeah. And I met Paul Check in probably the early 2000s, where he was really disrupting the industry, which is a lot of fun. And I kept taking his courses all the way up to HLC 3. But my upbringing was like, I was brought up Catholic. I fell asleep a lot in church. And, from parents who are kind of an interesting balance of my dad's more of a mathematical, scientific, logical type of personality, and that my mom is very calm, and she does yoga and she's into more spiritual practices and stuff. So I'm a kind of a blend of both of them, right? So my parents are from South America, and when they moved here, before they started a family, like they've always been active. They started getting into playing tennis and all these different things. So it's always just around it. And this is back when in health clubs, they weren't always that accommodating to children or young kids being in the space. So I'd just be hanging out with my cousins, just killing time while my parents were playing on the tennis court. Try to find quarters so we could play video games or something. But I was always just around it, right? So, but further down the road, when I started this business, Domestic Athlete, after leaving the club I was at for quite some time, managing a big team and everything, sort of the coming out of corporate story, right? I started this business and called Domestic Athlete, which is basically supporting busy parents and professionals in a busy life and managing their life force to keep going, right? And I noticed that the people I was working with, they're stressed out. So they're showing up to the gym for a workout or expecting a workout. And there's times where I'm like a really hard workout is probably the last thing they need right now. And that's when I started thinking, what else can I offer that can support them today, which was Reiki. That's when I started taking my level 1, level 2 Reiki at the time. And I was like, what is something I can offer them that can just pull the pin and then release some of the pressure so that when they get off the table and they start leaving the gym, they just feel better than when they came in, ready to go back into their work. And then the following workout or the following week, their energy's back and then we can train again, right? So the working in versus working out balance, right? So I was like, what was missing in my practice at the time was that thing to go inward, go introspective. And once I added that, there was a whole new different element to what I was able to do with people.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. So you actually did Reiki on them when they were on the table?
Yeah, like we would do Reiki. This is back when I was also working in a fitness space. We had treatment rooms and stuff too. So it was a fitness studio, but also a treatment rooms where we can stretch out clients and do meditation, stuff like that. So sometimes we'd finish up a workout on the table and we do the Reiki work. And there's some clients that they wouldn't classify themselves as spiritual or into any of that sort of stuff. And they just loved it. Like just something like just literally just fall asleep on the table within like seconds. Like it's just because I get it. When I get Reiki done on me, I'm out like a light. I'm just snoring. And so it's got on this effect to it, right? So and it's just a great way to close out a session sometimes. You want to leave
Mm.
relaxed, right? You don't want to leave and go back to work all wound up or anything. So I found it was a great tool to add balance to the experience they were having.
Absolutely. A little bit different from my experience though, because I think I got my Reiki master back in 2004, so like almost 20 years ago. And talking to clients about it then, like they had no clue. They were not open to it. Very, very few times did I find somebody who was actually open to it. So it took a while
Yeah.
to build that up. So I'm so glad that you were able to do that.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to ask you, so what is it that has people stuck in the modern world? Like in your experience, what have you found that keeps them stuck?
It's a great question, and I've kind of tried to narrow it down to just as few things as possible, just to simplify things. And I find that what I guess a symptom of stuckness would be the first thing that I alerted to when I was personal training was pain, physical pain, or
Mm.
injuries or illnesses, things that you think based on a typical timeline should start healing by now, but they're not healing. That was the one thing I was noticing. I have a client that has all the money they need, all the time they need to get the right physios, to get the right people, but for whatever reason, this ankle injury, this knee injury, whatever, is just not going away. And now, and this is before I had the tools, I was like, why? Why is it not going away? And why is it the left versus the right? I started asking all these questions. That's where all the other mentors and stuff started showing up later. So pain was the first one. Another one could be if they're becoming a bit more self-aware, addictions of some kind. I'm not talking more extreme. It could be extreme, but those people would not typically come into my space. But addictions as far as scrolling on your phone or snacking or just the typical stuff that regular folks deal with as far as like habits that are not really moving the needle forward, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
And those things could though result in poor sleep, bad stress management, or they're starting to slowly put on weight over time and are wondering where this weight is coming from,
Mm.
right? So those types of things. And the other thing is sometimes what gets us stuck. This one's a stealthy one, is comfort, right?
Oh, yeah.
Say bills are getting paid. Bills are getting paid. You know, life is good for the most part. Maybe good but not great, but good, right? There's nothing really pressuring the situation. Things are comfortable. Our comfort can really hold us in a place.
Well, because we become complacent, right? So
Yeah,
it's easier to be complacent than to take action when you don't
yeah, and
need to, right? When you feel you don't need to. So,
yeah, and I found too, like when we had, we experienced, pandemic and stuff like that, like a lot of people got their cages rattled. Like our comfort zone was really pressured. If you kept your job during that time, you probably worked harder than you've ever worked. And going out into the world and dealing with all these different elements that now you have to consider with your work, or your business just disappeared, or you lost your job. So like everyone's comfort zone was really rattled.
yeah,
But it did
that hard
result in,
stop. There's that
yeah,
hard stop right there, right? So
yeah, yeah.
take action. Yeah.
But it hopefully for a lot of people too, it resulted in a new direction, right? A new relationships, new perspective on your health and what an asset health is, right? There's so many different things that disruption of your comfort zone can gift us if we can shift our mindset and a perspective around what's happening, right?
And I think that that's still happening. That some people experience the changes immediately, and some people are still going through those changes. Like I know I am. Like I went from teaching at the gym to online, and then it was a struggle to keep that going for as long as I did. And then I had some
Yeah,
accidents that, caused me to not be able to work for an extended period of time. So now I'm doing this. Like who knows where
yeah,
it will go, right? So these changes
yeah.
still keep coming through. How about instant gratification? That's got to be one reason why, you know.
Yes, that's
Oh,
definitely one as well. Where and in the weight management or weight loss space too. This is a common one where I've been doing all the stuff, doing all the things, but I'm not getting any results. And sometimes I'll like when I used to train with people a lot in the gym. That's why I'm keeping their training logs, right? Because I can point out, well, you're actually faster here, you're stronger here, more mobile here. So we are getting results, right? It's the body composition part, and we can steer it back to the key indicators or the things that actually will impact weight loss. And once you've checked off all the basics, we can ask the question, do we need to go see a specialist? Do we need to get an allergy test? Do we need to, right? Because it's not just you're doing all the work and then you're being punished and you don't get results. So, and sometimes getting a realistic idea of how long it takes to produce a result in any given thing. I feel like if I was training you in about 2 weeks, I could show you strength training increase. I can show you results in strength training. I can show you results in metabolic work, right? Weight loss is harder. It's a more of a long game, right? Um, and our industry is just inundated with quick fixes, right? And they sell you
Everywhere. It's everywhere, not just our
the magic potion or whatever it is, or the magic program. This thing, one thing that drives me crazy too, in the fitness industry is they still create in the marketing an idea that it's the exercise that's going to create the weight loss when there's so much more to it. But the apps and the ads and everything, having a guy or a girl in this, you know, slick outfit doing exercise, it's more sexy than, someone meditating and weighing their food and whatever, right?
That
So
depends on
people,
what stage you are in your life, because I find that very sexy. If a man is
yeah,
meditating, now
yeah,
I really, really appreciate that. I
yeah, yeah,
was laughing earlier, not, at you, but it was just the way that you said that you look at their results and you'll point things out to them, like, look at
yeah,
this, or look at this. And it's like, I feel like you're no nonsense type of person. Like you'll just call them out like for what it is, right? In a nice way. You do it in a nice way. Like you look at the details and you get results because you are very um, attuned to those details, right? Am I
yeah.
right?
I feel like my style, very rarely am I calling someone out in a way that's confrontational or in a way that really makes them uncomfortable. But I do have a way, and I almost I don't know if how I can even explain it, but I do have a way of um maybe it's through questions, and this is through the training I've got with coaches and mentors that have helped me learn how to be a better communicator, is asking questions and yes, the training logs and the things is the data, right? um and asking them, I've asked clients before, like, what opportunities are still there for you in nutrition right now, right? What opportunities are there, right? And I teach them from the beginning to trust themselves, trust your intuition, um trust what comes up for you, because I think you live in your skin more than anyone else in the world. So and what you encounter every day, right? I found seems to be in a weight loss idea here, but like I found, a stubborn sort of weight situation for females is different than it is for a male,
Mhm.
right? Quite often for men, it's just a math game, and it might be me calling him out in a man to man kind of like way, like, dude, what are you really doing, right? Um, for females, I found that one of the main reasons why a lot of the females I've worked with, because they're usually career women and they're busy, they have busy lives, is the amount of stress they're under has got them protecting themselves, right? And their body's guarding, and it's not it like it's got to be in its sort of parasympathetic, this healing state to release weight. If it's guarded, and they could be doing everything. They could be working out, hydrating, doing all the things, but their body's just saying, I'm still stressed out, so I'm not going to let go of anything until
Hormones, that's a big thing.
yeah, there's so
And
many factors, right?
yeah, absolutely. And past trauma too. So I have
Yeah,
to say, I really like your approach. And because I like it when somebody calls me out on my shit too, but
yeah,
in a nice way. Like don't get all up in my face. So I like the way that
yeah,
you pose the
yeah,
questions and you kind of put it back on them to kind of do some reflection and to come
yeah,
up with their own information, because they know, they innately know as well. Sometimes they just need to have been asked the right questions, right?
yeah, totally, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so what about, I wrote down relationships here, but I think that's valid. I think that that would also keep people stuck where they are, right?
Yeah, and it could be a comfort thing, or it could be a thing where it's uh, like, and I say relationships, it could be immediate, like your partnerships, but it could also be like your relationships to the people in your home, like your kids. I've worked with people that maybe have a really stressed relationship with one of their kids, right? because their kid's going through like a very shifting time. I worked with a young, well, he was young he was 14 at the time, um, uh, uh, a young man that is the youngest of three boys, probably got the brunt of the stress when his parents separated, right? And when I started working with him, he was a really good athlete. Um, we barely exchanged any words in most of those sessions at the beginning because he just seemed so angry. And at that age, not even really sure how to communicate it, right? And the dad was frustrated, and the mom was worried. And so like, this difficult relationships that we have with mom and dad or with your kids and stuff, but also relationships you're having at work. I've worked with people that have their second family is probably the people they work with at their job. And there could be one or two people that just makes them cringe when they enter their office, right? And it's creating more stress. I call it the fishbowl effect. Like your fish will die if you don't change your water regularly, right? So think of like your workspace or the space you live in. It's like a fishbowl. So if there isn't regular flow and change of energy and clearing of stuff or venting out through conversation or whatever communication, that's like clearing some of the junk in the water, right? And if it's left like that,
Becomes toxic for sure.
it becomes toxic. It affects so many things. It affects your sleep, how you eat, the choices you make, so many things. So yes, relationships I feel is something that it's not something that's commonly brought up right out of the gate in
For
the
sure.
consult, but sometimes there's things where I'm in the back of my head going, we're gonna have to circle back to that
Well,
piece because I'm
you have
curious.
such a good rapport with people. I'm sure that eventually, people talk about stuff. You become like the hairdresser.
Yeah,
You're the
it's very
bartender.
much like
You
that.
get to hear a lot of
Yeah.
and talk about it. That's good because
Yeah. The interesting thing too is there because in the energy work, right? Like and when you blend like fitness with energy work, their bodies are always telling something. They're always telling a story, right? So the injury that I told you about earlier, that's telling a story, right? So sometimes it leads me to asking questions in a non-invasive sort of way, right? Like for example, the ankle that I was talking about, the ankle root is related to the root chakra, which is safety and security, which is related to your tribe. You know, if you just read the body like a map, and the body never lies, right? So
absolutely.
um, it's a great opportunity to guide and lead in a way that brings them into the I say brings them to the well to start exploring another part of their journey, right?
Yeah, it totally makes sense to combine fitness with the spiritual aspect. Like I think that's going to be the way of the future, the norm moving forward, especially for people who are empaths like us, right?
Mhm.
Okay, my next question was how do you get people unstuck? So what is it that you do?
Yeah, good question. First thing I do is one of the very first things that happens in the beginning stages, and it could happen as early as the questionnaire that they fill out before they even have the first call with me, is I'm asking them questions that makes them think about, hmm, can I bring my arms over my head in that position? Like all these different things that I just ask in these four different categories. So basically, what I'm getting to is I slowly start turning up the volume on self-awareness through some of the things I do in the intake process. And once we get started, I just have them observe, right? I just started with a new client recently, and he's just basically training away and observing, and we're checking in every day. I'm like, how did it go? How's things going? All that stuff. And to just become the watcher of their lifestyle and what they're up to and their habits and stuff. That's the first thing because that reveals what I call the the key indicators of the data that we need to make the first move,
Mm.
right? And it could be as simple as based on what we've learned in the first 5 days is you're just struggling to get to bed on time. So how do we get you an extra half hour? Because that could lead to the way your morning looks. It could lead to how you start choosing foods throughout the day. If you're not mentally fatigued, it could lead to your moods and how you engage with other people. Like it can spill. So I try to find the highest yielding, most accessible move they can make.
Mm.
Um, based on the intake process. So that's how I get them started. And then from there, we trust that it all things lead. Like I had one lady I worked with for, I call it my 10-day reboot. Sleep was the challenge. And we went for 10 days straight. Let's try to get you to bed 10:30 or earlier, right? And it changed her night routine completely, right? And it automatically changed her morning routine and how she was getting along with her kids, right? And this is during COVID at the time, so everyone was contained inside, right? So what happened was by day 3 or 4, she already started losing weight. Like
Just
so
by
many
changing her
things.
sleep.
Yeah, just getting to sleep on time, right? Because she was making the decision she was making with a more clear mind too was more aligned, right? So that's what gets me excited. What is the one thing that we can shift or change in the next 10 days that's the highest yielding, that's also accessible and free right now, right? And there's so many things, right? Instead
Yeah.
of me inundating you with all these different rules and ideas and programs and stuff like that, like let's just start with one thing for 10 days, see how it builds. And
Yeah,
it's like,
because anybody can do just one thing, right?
yeah,
Rather than
yeah,
asking them to do five or six, like anybody can just do one thing. That's great. And I love how I resonate with this so much because even when I used to teach my classes, I would try to engage people and teach them. There was always a why as to what we were doing, right?
yeah,
And I would always encourage them to understand why. Like, for example, when you're standing in like whatever pose it is, why is your arm in external rotation versus internal rotation? And
yeah,
how does that relate to when you're getting into the car and you're reaching over to close the door? You're going to be an internal rotation. But when you reach back to grab your seatbelt, you're going to be an external rotation. So
yeah,
I tried to help them kind of get that through their mind that what you're doing in class is translating to real life, and that's why we're doing this. So always thinking about your mobility and how to move forward and do things in a safer way so that you're not injured and you can improve your posture and the poses that we end up doing in class. So I love that. I love that. Self-awareness
yeah,
is absolutely important, not just in class or in a session. It's all the time.
yeah. And it's an exercise or a practice that also helps you with being present. Like before we got on the call today, it's like we were talking about how I got home from my other work, and I was asking myself, how do I ground before I get on with you and stuff? And I'm gonna walk the dog because she's looking at me and she wants to go out. It's a nice sunny day out, and so it's basically comes down to like, what can I do to get present, right? And self-awareness is part of that process, is always kind of just dialing back in. I was one minute I was just kind of like scrolling or I was doing something, and then okay, let me get present before I get on this call. Let me get present before my kids come home from school, right? And
Wait,
you know,
sorry, go ahead.
like becoming more self-aware of what that really means also helps us get present when we're about to make a food choice,
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah,
Is this
that's
next
why.
food choice gonna is this food choice gonna allow me the opportunity to show my body, like express love to myself through this
Yeah.
next choice, right? Or
Yes.
honoring my body, right? So
Also important while you're eating too. That's why they're always encouraging you not to be distracted while you're eating. Really be present with your food, right?
yeah, yeah.
Guilty of that. I'm not always. So that's one thing I'm working on myself as well. So while we're on that subject, this was a question I was going to ask you at the end,
Mm,
but you were talking about how you prepared for today's conversation. You got grounded, you took
mm,
the dog out for a walk. So my question was, people feel better after they see you.
mm.
And you see, I don't know how many clients you see in a day or in a week, but how do you fill yourself up? How do you prepare for these clients? Because it takes a lot of energy, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's an important question to ask anybody if you have any coaches or empaths or people that work in this space that are maybe new to it. Because I've heard stories of people um taking on their clients' stuff, right? So the self-care practice, which is a very general thing to talk about, is basically how I started to that let's just put it this way, this the higher our frequency or higher our energy is as the coach, the less likely we are to succumb to other energies, right? Because in a way our clients are coming to us to draw some of what we have, right? So we have to show up. We have to show up well rested, well fed, well hydrated, all that stuff. That's the first thing. The second thing too is one thing I realized was when I was getting into Reiki and the energy work and learning how to channel and douse and all this stuff. One thing I checked in on myself was if I can learn this skill, I promise to only use it for good and to support people, right? And support them on their journey or whatever, right? So that's when all of a sudden I got a lot of opportunities to work with people in the energetic space and spiritual work and stuff. Um, and I feel like when we know why we are doing something, um, and not relying on, like, for example, like I've witnessed, I don't know if this is happening. It probably happened to me when I was personal training, but like there's times where a trainer or a coach gets really upset when their clients aren't getting results and stuff or not following the steps or whatever, because almost their well-being is invested.
Yeah. Yeah. They're taking
And
that. Yeah.
yeah, and that can suck your energy, right? And then you have to ask yourself, and that's why coaches need to talk to coaches, is ask yourself, why are you so invested? Like it's still their choice. It's their free will to select that food or not select that food or go to the gym or whatever. They're clearly dealing with something. It's why they're not following the program exactly, right?
Yeah.
So as the coach, you want to be there to support that part and not hammer them all the
Yeah.
time for,
And
you
that's where
know.
you have to have those kinds of boundaries. You have to be your own self-aware. It's not to extend, they're
Mhm.
not, your clients are not extensions of you, right? We influence them. We hope that we influence them in a positive way, but they're not extensions. So their success, we hope that they succeed, but their success is not going to be something that I'm going to take on if they end up failing or,
Yeah,
way it goes, right? It's, we have
yeah,
to put the onus back on that as well.
yeah. Another way to answer your question too about how I maybe protect myself is we need to remember to just keep practicing what we're teaching, right? So and call ourselves out if we're not practicing it, right? Say, I'm telling everyone get to bed before 10:30 at night. But at the same time say the reason why I sometimes don't get to bed at that time
Mm.
is XYZ, right? Or and what happens to me when I don't get to bed at that time looks like this. That's why I'm recommending we all work on that. Right? Like I'm still human. I deal with stuff, right? I have, a lot of things that I'm dealing with in my personal life and running a business and all this stuff, right? We all have our own stuff. But also remembering to always check in on yourself on doing the effort or leaning on a mentor or coach of your own that can help steer you on the path when you're moving to your next level, right?
That's where your why comes in, right? Why are you doing it? Because you want to
Yeah.
feel better, you want to have more energy. Like, do you help your clients maybe come up with some affirmations or whatever their why is?
Yeah, there's a, one of the part of my process is through almost, I guess, like through distance Reiki, right? So when I went online, um I started using more of the distance work and it looks different in the sense that it's more of a conversation rather than me healing with my hand, although I take people through meditations and stuff. But I'm picking up intuitively on, if I were to look at their chakras, I'm picking up intuitively on the areas that are being activated in a given subject matter, right? When I flip my questions to align with what I'm picking up, it's really cool when they know that's what I'm doing too, because I can be fully transparent with where these questions are coming from. But when I give them the questions, they can it's almost like how they answer is like giving a chance to, I'm holding the space for them to release that. But they're like, I've often heard people say, I don't know why I'm talking to you about this.
Yeah.
Because
Start
it's
to
because I
unravel.
asked you, yeah, it's
Yeah.
because I asked you that question, but there's a reason why I asked the question. And how does it feel now that it's getting out? Well, yeah, I haven't talked to anybody about that in maybe 8 years. Like, oh, interesting, right? Because that area energetically is the same area that's innervating that shoulder that's not healing right now. So, I'm just, again, it's like a map, it's reading, right? So, um, that's sort of thing was added to my work when I started learning those skills was really, it was a game changer. It was like, now I don't have to feel like I'm swimming, blind in the ocean trying to like help somebody or support them or hold the space for them.
Mhm.
Um, and feeling like I didn't memorize those questions in that textbook to ask them a very specific thing, right? It's more just, and it comes back to being present again, right?
Yes, and helping them on all levels, not just, the one focus. I think that when things come up naturally for unraveling, it'll come up on their own time. But when you encourage
Yeah.
that, that unraveling process is really key to get to healing, full healing, right?
Yeah, and some layers go deeper than others, right? There's some things that you can resolve really quickly and within less than a month that habit is broken and they're moving on. And there's some deeper layers of stuff that might goes further back, like into childhood or whatever, um that when they're ready to move to another level in their process or when they are reaching for more, that's when it shows up. I tell people too, like I spent more time in the gym than I've spent, balancing spreadsheets in a business. So there's tons of opportunities in business as an entrepreneur for me where I encounter my own like demons, right? Because I haven't spent as much time there as I have, moving weights or whatever, right? So I can resolve a lot of fitness challenges very quickly because I've been doing it for a long time. But in other areas where I'm quite new, but it's still very important to me to shift or change, I need to lean on people that have done that work more than I have to teach me the way, right? So
That actually
um
leads into my next question. So, what inspires the desired, needed changes to live an authentic life? So, you just said, leaning on others for support. That would help, right? Uh,
Yeah, yeah. And I think what inspires it comes from initially the signs and symptoms we're having of frustration, all that stuff that leads into the conversation, which could actually lead into me doing that reading, right? When we make that connection, it's that connection that's made to whatever the ailment or whatever the conversation is. When we make that connection, then it starts to become more clear to them. Oh, I see it from a different perspective, right?
can
Then the buy-in.
you give me an example?
Let me think. When I tore, I'll use myself as an example. When I tore my pec, when I got injured, I it was the left side, and um, the first thing that was very interesting was as soon as it happened, the second it happened, first my logical mind said, "Oh, that's what a pec tear feels like," because I could feel it, and the elastic, it was a creepy feeling. But um, as soon as I popped off the bench press and I was holding my shoulder, I was overcome with relief, which is a weird emotion to to have, realizing that I almost got pinned under a bench press because I lost one arm, right? So, and then I started thinking about that. And I was like, I'm sitting in the emerge waiting to get my x-ray now with a friend. And she's like, Brian, why are you like smiling so much? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not happy that this happened, but I feel like this feeling of relief that kind of like I don't need to be this guy anymore. Because the reason why I got into powerlifting the first, I didn't realize it was happening. I was unaware of it when it was happening, but weightlifting and strength training was a way for me to channel my anger as a teenager, as a young athlete, as you know a boy becoming a man, and and sort of like asserting myself, right? Which, if you go further back, could be stemming back to being bullied when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and so it's like there's so many different layers to it, but I finally just felt like I didn't, because I had such an identity built into being this power lifter, right? Like I said, it put me on the map in the industry as a niche, right? So, but I was like, finally, I don't have to do this anymore. I have to beat myself up like this anymore, right? And then,
Yeah, I can
you
so
know,
appreciate that story. Oh my goodness. I'm glad you mentioned it because it takes me back to before, the pandemic. I was the group exercise director at a prestigious club in Markham, and then then the ownership had changed in 2015 and I opened my own studio in my basement. But the pressure was always on to look a certain way, to be a certain way. I'd have to be at the gym, for hours and talking to people. And I was, it was always this persona that I felt like I had to put on. Um, wow. But when COVID happened and I couldn't go to the gym anymore,
Yeah.
I felt that 6 weeks of just peace and quiet and not having to do any. I know this
Yeah.
sounds really bad. I know some people had it tough, and I'm not, comparing myself to them. I'm just saying for me, my experience was like, those were the best 6 weeks of my life.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not going to the gym. I'm not going to work out today. Like, F
Yeah.
that. I'm just chilling. And it was just so peaceful and quiet outside. You couldn't hear anything. Where I used to live in Markham was just so busy, busy, busy. Even in the middle of the night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, you just hear this hum of noise and everything. And it was just so quiet. And my body was finally like my body could just like just relax and let go, you know?
Yeah.
I probably took it a little bit too far. I probably should have hit the gym sooner than I actually did. But still, like it was, and I realized now that it was also a way for me to channel some of my anger, my energy.
Hmm.
Started when I was, part of an unhappy marriage for so many years. If I was on that elliptical, I was on for like 75 minutes going hard because
Yeah.
I was literally trying to run away from my problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it took a
Yeah,
beat.
there was a period of the initial novelty of like, well, everyone, let's just hunker down and go through this process. I knew it was, I think most of us were assuming, yes, this is temporary, we're gonna get through this and stuff. Um, and but there was like this a little bit of relief for a little while of like, we don't have to grind for a little while. Let's just like do the right thing. Let's just figure this out, right? Then over time, as it started to extend, at least for me and maybe for some people too, over time, I started to realize things are actually really going to be changing in a long term. I don't know exactly what yet, but I went through a phase of grieving,
Oh,
mostly in the first year and a half of it, taking walks and stuff like that, looking around the old neighborhood where my son used to play when he was little, and just like I went through a phase of letting go of a lot of things that I was becoming aware, very aware that needed to shift and change or just evolving and moving on. Or in tarot, sometimes I do tarot as well. One of the cards, a tower card, represents the breaking down of old beliefs and systems, you know, based on a false idea or an expired idea, right? So that's what the beginning stages felt like, was just a breaking down of old systems, but hopefully to create space for something new and better, right? But we all had to kind of go through that, like a grieving process, because a lot still hasn't changed, you know, since we've come through, right? So um but if you ruminate too much about it or get, too depressed about it, you almost you'll never get out of that, so we had, just like how we're online right now, like there's things you've changed, I've changed, that are probably going to be at least longer term parts of our business now, because
yeah,
you
absolutely.
know
And also though, there are some people who are still resisting
hmm
changes and still wanting to go back to the old ways, and
yeah,
it's just not working anymore. So more and more people are realizing that they have
yeah,
to.
which yeah, yeah, and it's something that that, like, something like comes back to that injury that won't heal, right? Hanging on to something that no longer really serves you, right? So, um, and that can be hard. It's like if you picture, it's like you're like there's a hurricane and you're hanging on to like a pole or a flagpole, and you're just like flapping in the wind, right?
Yes, yes.
Kind of want to flag.
No, I can't get that image out of my head.
Yeah.
That was me for a long time. No more. So listen, so okay, because I shared about that, about my relationship and just running away. And I see a lot of people at the gym who do the same thing there. And I always question myself, like these hardcore runners, what are they running
Yeah.
away from?
Yeah.
So a client was to come to you and you realize that they're stuck in ouch. Yeah, that's probably telling me something right
Yeah.
right elbow.
Yeah.
If a client is stuck in a relationship, in a really bad relationship,
Mhm.
what kind of advice would you give them? Like, what would you say? How would you get them unstuck if possible?
Yeah, well, first of all, I won't attempt to give relationship advice as not as like a completely trained relationship coach, but relationships do come up. And, first thing I do with the individual I'm working with, because that's the person I have access to, is is how do we raise their frequency, right? Through their health, through their sleep, through all the things that we're doing already, right? But also if someone's bringing to me a relationship situation, um I'll help them tap into sort of their intuition and what's coming up for them. Like one thing I've asked like a client that was working with a coworker, that was in the very beginning we started talking about this, um was I go, when your supervisor comes in and he's having one of those tangents and is doing that thing, like how old does he seem to you? She's like a 12-year-old. I go, well, yeah, there's something that's activating him potentially. I don't know who he is. So, like, there's something that could be potentially activating him that's bringing up something that has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with the thing that you forgot to hand in. It has nothing to do. So, I was sharing that with her to empower her in the situation and to not beat herself up about the way the boss has been reacting, right? So as we continued doing more of this work together, she became more attuned, right? And the things that she would be taking on, she wasn't taking them on anymore. And
Mm,
then once we got to that level, we were starting to talk about, okay, in your performance review or the interview coming up or the thing coming up, like let's walk through what might come up and how you would communicate in that space without, you know, making it a confrontational thing, right? Almost like if you're working for a company, the goal of everybody is to be successful together, right? So find the right context that's going to still come from that place, right? And whatever they do, you don't have control over, right? In a romantic relationship or in a corporate relationship, whatever, you still don't have control over how they want to react.
mm,
But it's more about how do we stay grounded and present in the situation? How do we want to communicate? What are our intentions going into it? How do we prepare before we even go into the meeting
mhm. So that
to be
you're not in
present?
a reactive state, right? You're in a
Yeah,
responsive state. I love that. Again, it goes back to the self-awareness piece there. Yeah, brilliant. I love it. I love that approach that you have with your clients. That's excellent.
yeah.
Um,
Another thing I can share like with like maybe partnerships is and it's a bit more of a harder place to go because these are probably the most meaningful relationships in our lives, right? So is you know at what at what point does it where you're at what point is it where you're asking of your partner to be something they just can't be, and just like how you're thinking a relationship or they are expecting you to be a certain way but you just can't be. I talk about like how I'm 5'6", I can't be 6'2". So if you need somebody that you need a trainer that's 6'2", I'm not your guy, right? So, right? So like there's a period where this I call it the spiritual math just doesn't add up anymore, right? And it's and a powerful step is understanding that there's nothing wrong with that. That's just kind of it's just a part of the journey, right? And then their next move. What's scary about that too, though, is like once you see that, you can't unsee it,
Oh, 100%. And then what's even
right?
worse, what once you see is like that person that you marry is probably your mother or your father, right? And once you
Yeah.
see, then that goes down a whole other rabbit hole for sure.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's amazing. I love this work. It's like it's never ending. But that doesn't bother me. I just love to do the work. I'm constantly
It's
expanding, growing.
constantly, yeah, you think about like I've been over 20 plus years in the industry, and you'd think, I'd laugh about like how many squats I've counted as a personal trainer, right? But I found too when I was really grinding out of the gym, like many clients back to back in a gym setting, like one workout after the next, in theory, you would think that would be really boring, but every person that comes into the next session is a different person with a different life and a different set of circumstances and a different goal and coming from a different kind of job, and it's a different conversation, right? So each time, if you keep recycling yourself, like, or like almost like resetting yourself before the next person comes in or the next class you're about to teach, it's a whole bunch of different people, different group of people, right? Like teaching a class, like I used to teach some classes as well, and like teaching like a 6 a.m. class has a different vibe than an 8 p.m. class, right? So there's all these different changes and subtleties in the frequency, which makes it interesting and new every time if you can stay present with it, right?
Absolutely. And that goes back to what I had asked you about, how do you keep yourself up there so you have the energy to do it? But you had said something about your clients, and how do you increase their frequency so that they can be more responsive to in their relationships or whatever happens in life, right?
Yeah.
Um, and giving them that skill, or giving them that the tools to raise their frequency, will also help increase that intuition as well.
Yeah.
So if there are changes that need to be made, they can start to face those things with more honesty and more clarity, right?
Yeah, I call it like their spidey senses or their superpowers start to come
Yes.
online,
Yes, exactly.
right?
Because we all have them. Some people think that, they don't have them, but it exists in all
We're
of us.
born with them. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're born with them. It's whether or not you want to look, but or what your environment was like, or if you're in a constantly in a state of survival, you're likely not to pause for a second and go and wonder if you have like intuitive gifts, right? So um I found too, like um when the longer I work with somebody, the more questions I'm asking them, because like deeper questions that they're answering themselves, because I've started to teach them how to, and because they're taking care of themselves, they have access. They're gaining access, but like they figure out the combination to access their higher self, right?
Yeah. When that
And I
goes on, it's amazing. You can see it.
Yeah. And that's what, like you mentioned too, when you're asking about what inspires the changes, when they tap into that, just like how right now I feel like I'm very aligned talking to you right now and having this conversation. And I find my eyebrows are going up, my face is getting really big. And that's like the look of inspiration,
Yeah.
right? And the sense of purpose. And I people always, when I'm in conversation like this in a networking call or whatever, I was like, Brian, I can feel your passion, right? And I'm like, because I'm totally
Yeah.
on right now and
Yeah.
totally
It's funny.
aligned,
I
right?
was feeling the same thing. I was thinking the exact same thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, so this conversation is almost over, right? Like we're just
Yeah.
like juicy parts of it, right?
Yeah.
I think we have so much more that we could talk about for sure. I
Yeah.
know we're running out of time today, but I think that we should do this again sometime.
Oh, definitely,
And I'm
100%.
really, I applaud you for your work. I love how you are inspiring. You're truly inspiring your clients, and you are just so open and approachable. And I wish you the absolute most success. I know you will be.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for being
Thanks for
here.
the
Yeah,
opportunity. Yeah, it's been great.
we'll
Looking
talk
forward to the
again.
next one.
Yeah, we'll talk again for sure. Thank you so much, Brian.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.